Hi, welcome to the small shed. This week on the Cyclekart I'm hopefully finishing off the steering wheel. See you in a minute. So it's time to start and think about putting the steering wheel together now. I've put it back into its jig effectively. I've cut the slots out for where the spokes will go. And I need to put some sort of a barrier in, I think, based on my previous experience with the epoxy resin. I need to put something in as a barrier between it and the base, but I'll probably use a polythene or something like that. I've trimmed the spokes now. I've smoothed the back off the boss. Needs a lot of cleaning up still to do, but basically that's the boss done. It needs re-drilling because they're full of epoxy, but we can do that easily enough. But now that slots into the spaces that are left in the wheel rim, I hope. Reasonably tightly. And even just working on friction, it's now become quite rigid. The boss, which will be screwed on with 3 other bolts, but I've also got the big bolt in the middle, sorted that out now, so that will clamp them. That will clamp the spokes as well as the resin and the other 3 bolts when I get round to doing them. So that will give me that. And so really all I need to do now is stick the pieces on in the right order. Number 1 will go to number 5 on the back, and they will need to be glued either side. That will hold the spokes. Again, that needs trimming off and sorting out, but essentially that's pretty much it. And number 3 and number 7 will go together on there. But even like that now, got tremendous rigidity in there. I'm quite happy with that. I was always worried about this not being strong enough, but in all honesty I really can't see any problem with that at all. It really should go together quite tightly. So I think that's ready to start assembly now. I shall, as I say, put some polythene underneath it, and then first off just get the spokes resined in. And what I'll probably do at the same time is glue the top layer on, because that will then also, if I clamp it down, hold all the spokes flat in the right sort of position when I do that. And that lines it all up in the middle. I will get, for instance, number 1, which lives there. I've roughed up the surface. We'll just epoxy that. I'll cut these back to the right line, glue number 1 in, glue number 3 in, there's number 2 and number 4. So there's a little bit of spring still in them that just needs clamping down. But if I do that one at a time, radially, and clamp at the same time, get them exactly where I want them on the rim, that should give me one side all clamped up neatly with the rim sorted like that. And then once that's done, I can take it out, peel the backing off, and we can go at the other side and get that done, and then do all the final cleanup. Now I've just put the wheel down on its master template again, got some epoxy on the go. What I'm going to do, I've put some double-sided tape where the spokes land, that should mean it's like a non-stick surface. And at the moment now I'm just putting in some epoxy to glue one section of wheel on, and I'll feed a little bit into the spokes at the same time, get all that fixed, clamp it down, and then I can move round to the next section and work my way around the wheel doing that. Once all that's done, it should be then a fairly contiguous sort of lump that will work as a steering wheel. I can then take it out of its mould, turn it over, and come back and do the other side then. But at the moment I'm more concerned with just getting this first part on. Just do one and then work all the way around. You don't really need to see me doing every one of them. And as I say, just make sure there's plenty of resin going into that spoke arrangement there, and any squeeze out there should be reasonably well contained. So part number one, if I can find it. Number four, number one. Part number one. A bit of tissue. We'll go on there, matching up with the rim and the spokes. Doesn't matter if it's a little bit out, I can soon correct it later on by just sanding. You know, the aluminium will sand with it, but I don't want to leave too much in the way of work to do on it once it's done, once it's glued in. So we'll squeeze that up tight. Always a tendency for things to move when they're clamping them. Tend to try and slide. Okay, let's pick up some of the surplus resin to make sure it's all level. Make sure it doesn't stick to the blocks there. The one thing I hadn't thought about, this block is getting epoxied to the rim. So on the future ones I'll have to make sure I've got a non-stick bit of tape on the verticals as well. We'll just slide that in at the moment to keep it separate. Hopefully it won't be too much of a problem. So that's one down, 7 to go. We'll just work our way around bit at a time. So that's one side done. That's all glued up now. Just got to let that set, and I'll no doubt have a bit of a job to get this prized up off the backing, but I think it should be okay. And all I need to do really is go around any of the the joints with the sharp knife, and that should get out any residual sort of stickiness from the resin that's oozed out. I've wiped most of it off. So we'll just leave that now for 12 hours or so, let it set, and then hopefully we've at this point now got a steering wheel. We can just stick the other side of the rim on next, and it'll be ready for just finishing off and tidying up. Right, so here we are, 24 hours on. It's stuck down a bit, I think, but I'm just going to try and lever it up a bit here and there. Get some of the glue. It's only just on the very surface at the joints that it's stuck. Doesn't seem to have stuck anywhere else. And that's getting it. That's it, it's coming up now. See how much strength there is in things. There we go, that's it, I think, all the way around. Yep, that's gone. So we have half a steering wheel. Yeah, that is fine. That's far stronger than I thought it would be. We've got the solid chunks of resin in. Well, we've got it in 3 out of 4. There could do with a bit more in there, but we'll deal with that when we come to glue in effectively number 8, which is that one. And when we glue that one in, we'll sandwich some more in there. I've got to do the same thing now, just cut these square. But the strength in that is quite amazing. It really is. That is not going to be a problem at all. Far better than I had hoped for. Now we can just tidy up all these last bits of resin, and then where the joints are we'll just give it a good sand, get all the bits of epoxy off, start and get some consistency to the finish, and any gaps that there are I'll fill with the carefully preserved dust that I've kept from the sanding. Got plenty of stuff to be able to fill it with glue and sawdust, and so that when it's got its final sanding with something a bit less aggressive, probably down to 300. I mean, I'll try it with a bit of 6, but I think 6 is too fine. Come down to about 320 grit, and we should end up with a nice finish. That's the 320. Yeah, 320 will give us a really nice smooth finish. Once the other side's on and all that is then sanded off, I can then move in and just put the rivets that'll give the final additional fixing, which are sort of there and there, there and there, there and there, there and there, all the way around. There'll be 8 rivets fixing through as well. So it will be, as usual, I hope, belt and braces, because this isn't something you really want to have coming apart when you're halfway through a corner. But we'll get it turned over. I'll do the same thing again on the other side and come back to you when that's done, and we're getting the rest of the finishing done on the wheel. Right, so here we are, day later, all glued up, really solid, really happy with that, rigid as hell. What I need to do now is to work all the way around it. It's going to be long, slow and laborious, just sanding down take it back to bare wood, get all the resin off it, get the rim circular right the way back to the aluminium and polished up with air, and then take any of the gaps that there are in it, fill them with sawdust and glue, and then just come down through the grades of sandpaper to about 320 grit. I'm just starting off with 80 grit at the moment, just taking the bulk off just to get the shape right. I did debate long and hard whether or not it would be nice to have some like finger grooves on the back, but I can't think of a way to do it satisfactorily and evenly. It wants something like a circular tube that rotates in a drill or something, but only comes down to a certain depth, almost like a chop saw with a circular thing there that would go at regular intervals all the way around. But I really don't think I'm quite up to that, so I'm happy at the moment. It's something that could be done later if I can come up with a reason or a way to do it, but now all I'm going to do is just get this tidied up, and then it will be ready to have the holes drilled for the rivets to go in. There's 8 rivets got to go through, which are pretty much the braces to the belt and braces of the glue as well, and everything else. And then once that's done, we'll come back and you can see it when it's all been tidied up and ready for a bit of finish. So I'm 2 hours in at the moment, and we've at least got the outside pretty much back to aluminium and wood. A couple of areas still with a bit of resin apparent, and a lot of the inside is coming along. But it really is, you can see from the amount of sawdust we've got. I've cleaned up once or twice in the meantime. It's quite a laborious job, very labour intensive, but strangely rewarding. Okay, so that's taken the whole thing down through 80, 180, 320. I'm down at 400 grit now, so it's very smooth. It's not quite finished in terms of the amount of work that I've got to put in. There's still a little bit of work in the corners to tidy up, a bit of work on the spokes to tidy up, but I'm pretty much there. But I think now is the time to get the studs in the wheel. The brass pins that are basically holding the halves together as a backup, and I want to do that now because there will be a certain amount of sanding, maybe even filling to do around when I put them in. So I'm just going to mark that out in a minute, but I need to just check what we've ended up with as a steering wheel rim thickness. That's showing 20, 27, 28, 28, 27ish. So around the 27, 27 and a half, 28, that sort of mark. Now the studs I got, I think I bought 30mm. So yeah, they're 30mm. So I am going to need to take a little bit off them, but I've still got enough thread in there to be able to take 3mm off the end without any problem. And effectively what there is there is a stud that goes right the way through the wheel, and a little screw that goes into the end of it, which will provide a degree of clamping, but it's more cosmetic than anything. I'll put the screws on the back, the screw heads, because they're, rather than being a rivet, it'll have actually a screw head on the back there. I'll put that on the back, and hopefully if I can mark them out sufficiently well, I can just recess them about 1mm, which is what that head is, just to get them slightly below the surface. And I'll probably need to just set up the drilling machine to make sure it's coming in dead on the centre line there. But the first thing to do is to get that positioning right. They need to be at 45 degrees, so I'll probably use the old jig yet again. It just shows the value very often of making these jigs up, because this effectively started out as a means to router the aluminium to shape, and it's basically gone all the way through to being able to make and assemble all the timber bits, and it's now coming in as something to be able to do as a drilling guide. What I want to do, originally I was going to drill there, there, there and there, and one in the middle at each midpoint, and I may have mentioned earlier that I'm going to avoid that now. So I'm just going to rotate the wheel to midpoint between those spoke positions, which is about there. And this is probably why it's best not to do this now rather than when you've got the whole thing finished. And at each point now on that quadrants that I've marked on here, I can mark by eye the positions that I need to drill, and we'll hopefully have something which is reasonably symmetrical. And these are really just there for show, I think, more than anything, but it does give a tiny bit of extra support to keep the two halves together. So now I need to find the diameter of that. What I'll do is drill a very small, 1 or 2mm drill right the way through first, then take it back, and then I'll do the head recess, which is, I need something about 9mm in diameter, and then I'll do the 4mm all the way through for the studs. See what we've got in the 4 and a bit line. Now I've tried it with a 10mm 4 and a bit, I haven't got a 9, and I think this is one of those occasions where it's worth just waiting and getting the right tool or the right bit. That is just, that 0.5mm all the way around is probably just a little bit too much, and yes, I could fill it with sawdust and stuff, but I think it would be nicer with a 9mm hole. So I'm going to go off and get myself organised, a 9mm 4 and a bit first. In the meantime I'll just drill these positions with something small like about a 2.5mm drill. So once again the jig's coming in useful. I've clamped it down to the table, and what that means now is that as I rotate that, I've got a fixed distance in from the rim that I can locate the holes to go through, and they'll all be the same distance in. Again, reuse it all the while, it keeps coming back into use. Okay, we've got another delivery today, which is, I hope, the last bit of stuff I need for the steering wheel. I decided in the end, after a lot of toing and froing, that I would like to have a go at getting the little cross pieces that they have on the Blumels wheels, but rather than try and get a piece of aluminium with tapered holes drilled to be put on before I assembled it, I decided to take the coward's way out and did what I usually do in such circumstances. You just keep thinking about it and working the problem for a day or two, and sooner or later you come up with something that you think might be a suitable alternative. In my case, I came up with the buckles that you get on belts, the flap retainer pieces. That's got a small slit in it, but I don't quite know how I'm going to fix it, but those will be fixed over the spokes and will push into place about there, and will be hopefully put on with some epoxy or something, and I think it'll make a reasonable representation without getting too involved in machining things or anything like that. As I say, they should push on and sort of come to the rest at roughly the right place. Okay, so I've just been trying to sort out this hole for the brass pins to go in the steering wheel rim. I had originally thought I would just go away and get myself a 9mm Forstner bit, but it turns out that such things don't exist, or at least I can't find them. So the best thing I can do to come up with is a 9mm brad point bit, which gives a fairly nice flat hole, flat bottomed hole. I've just drilled out what is the hole that's likely to be in the steering wheel rim to a size that will take the shaft of the pin, and I'm just going to now just touch this off and go down maybe a millimetre or two, and I think I can set my depth on this now to 0, start the drill. Just go in very lightly. So what I'm hoping is that that will give me the same effect as a Forstner bit without too much distress to the timber. And when we get our pin, it should sink in nicely into the surface. So I think that will work. just remains to be seen in practice, but I only get one shot at this on each of the holes, and there's 8 of them to do, so wish me luck. The 8 on the back aren't quite as important, but 8 of them will show all the way. Okay, so far so good. I don't worry if it's slightly too deep, because I can always pack the head up. But I was more worried about tear out than anything else, but I think that's probably going to be the best I can achieve. And with a little bit of further sanding and that, I think we'll be there. Happy with that, as long as I can repeat it. So that's gone reasonably well. The only problem I have is that the pins that I got, I was guessing at the time as to how long those pins needed to be, and although I thought I had long enough pins, I have in fact got pins that are slightly too long, and there isn't enough meat in them threaded to do what I want to do, so I've just had to reorder another 10 that are 20mm instead of 27. It's interesting that when I bought these, they were, I think, about £7.50 last November. I just paid £18 something for them. So it's an indication of the way some of the things that we buy are going up. But I think that's more or less what I wanted. I've put the belt buckles on temporarily, they're not glued in or anything yet, but I think that will give me the Blue Moors look. By the time that gets a layer of oil on it, I think I'm going to be quite happy with that. So although there's a little bit more tiddling to do, that is now in a stage where it's a usable steering wheel with all the embellishments that I wanted on it, and it's beginning to look something like a wood rim steering wheel. So I will just finish off doing a bit of gluing up of things, and in a day or two's time no doubt I will get the revised studs, but in the meantime I think I'm going to call it a day on that, as being a finished, or as near as finished, article. Okay, so there we are. I'm leaving it at that point with the steering wheel. There's still a little bit of work to be done on it, but it's something that can be done more or less at any time now. The whole thing is a sort of contiguous piece of metal and wood that is all stuck together. I think it's plenty strong enough, and it's got its boss on ready to go straight onto the steering column, and any further fettling can happen later on. I think the most important thing is with this is to get on and get the thing built, and then worry about the tiny bits afterwards. So I hope it was of interest. Look forward to seeing you next week, when we'll be hopefully getting on more with the Cyclekart somewhere else, and I look forward to seeing you then. Bye!